Our first company of the evening, this evening, is Active Energy Group. They're listed on AIM in the alternative energy sector and have a market cap of roughly £38 million. I think they're a fascinating company. They describe themselves as biomass-based renewable energy and forestry management business. AEG are currently commercializing a biomass product which can be mixed with coal in an existing coal-fired power station. The Coalswitch reference plant is in Lumberton, North Carolina. I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about Lumberton in the next half an hour or so. I'm delighted to welcome Michael Rowan, CEO, and Andrew Diamond is CFO, and they're going to talk us through the company tonight. Welcome both.
Good evening, and thank you everybody for joining tonight's call, and thank you, Donald. I'm Michael Rowan, I'm CEO, and Andrew might want to say a couple of words.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Good to have me on. Thank you very much. I joined Active Energy in January of this year, so fairly new to the company, but an exciting time as we'll take you through.
Right, so turning through to the presentation, I'm just going to run through the rudiments of the business model as it is, and then explain to you the components of the business. So the feature now for the company is around the development of Coalswitch and the commercialization of Coalswitch. Coalswitch is a form of biomass, which I'll come on to in a second. But what we're looking at behind the business is obviously how to develop and commercialize that properly. There'll be three key components to what we describe as biomass revenues. The first is going to be direct sales of Coalswitch to the market, particularly to major offtake customers. That can include major oil traders or commodity traders, or it could also include power stations directly and coal mining companies or other potential biomass buyers. The second stage of the development, we'll be looking at licensing out the technologies that we're developing. Right now, we've spent a number of years developing the technology, and we're in the final throes of construction at Lumberton itself, which will have the proven version of how to create the product. That's presenting us with some exciting opportunities coming forward to us. And then finally, the other element to this is obviously the chance to sell the fuels to other potential partners and look at other derivative products that come off the back of it. Now, to make that business work effectively, there are a number of key components to it. You need to make sure that you've got feedstock and timber supplies, which are adequate in each relevant location you want to do. And one of the key things that we're focused on is looking at the exact ethnicity of its particular origins. And secondly, we obviously want to look at the services and technology division, which will complement those biomass revenues. The next page is obviously probably more important, which is what our immediate business focuses are. We're focused on what we call next generation biomass fuels. That's not the traditional white pellet. It is very much focused around a black pellet, or what we call an equivalent of a black pellet. That means that we're looking for a particular production process which is more environmentally friendly and is more environmentally aware, which means therefore that we are trying to minimize the use of fossil fuels in the production process, that we are focused very much on using residual feedstock sources, notably, for example, sawdust or wood chip or bark. And thirdly, we're focusing on a steam treatment process, which is very different to the underlying way that a white pellet is actually produced. Those three are key to the ethos to making the new pellet and remain our resounding principles that we're trying to work towards. We're obviously now looking to commercialize that, which takes me to the scalable fuel production facilities that I'm referring to there. We're building right now a 3-ton per hour plant, which will have the ability to expand up to a 5-ton an hour plant very quickly. And we're looking at expanding that production capacity in the near and medium term future, and then ultimately creating larger scalable facilities as well. We've had a number of interested parties who want to expand in that area, and that will be a focus for us. And then thirdly, we're looking at developing the IP and the production know-how to ensure that we can expand our knowledge and know-how in this area and expand it into the marketplace. Those are going to be key to the future for the business. What is Coalswitch? Well, in short order, it is a black pellet. If you look to the right-hand side, you can see a very sample of that pellet. It looks a little bit like licorice, if you like, but its key qualities are key principles that we've always found as developing in the fuel over the last 3 years. It has to fundamentally be able to co-fire with coal, which is what Donald mentioned at the outset. We're not looking necessarily to replace coal, but certainly complement coal and significantly reduce the emissions that are currently underway. We're trying to address there a key market. Coal is still a major constituent of power and electricity generation right now, and we need to be able to focus into that market. and particularly in North America, which is where we've noticed being key. The second key quality is it needs to be feedstock agnostic. I've made very clear earlier on that we are looking at waste revenues and waste residues as being the key for us. But we're looking at all sorts of waste, hardwood, softwood, that could be used in the process. That is also key to developing a fuel that is going to be easy to develop and easy to adapt. I've mentioned in passing that we create a fuel that is carbon neutral. We've done some testing on that so far. Its most attractiveness actually is also what it does in reduction of NOx and SOx and various other pollutants as well. But we are focused on trying to create a fuel that will be cutting emissions to a significant level. And finally, there's obviously another key element to this. We try to create a fuel which is hydrophobic, as in it can withstand getting wet and still keep its underlying qualities. And that is very different to what existing white pellet is about. We have developed that over time. It means it's much more easier to deliver, it's much more easier to develop, and it's much easier for the end customers to be able to use. Now, this process has taken many years in development, really, since 2017 to 2020. And obviously, we got our first customer in December last year with PacifCorp. I think since then and since early in this year, we've been getting more interest and more commercial conversations are ongoing. And I think that will see further development for the fuel and the opportunities. In very short order about the competitive analysis of Coalswitch, I wanted to give you a quick snapshot. If you look at this slide here, you can see the two real phrases to look at are, number one, the calorific value, the burn value, the heat value of the fuel. The fuel itself has an equivalence towards coal, which is why it's therefore easier to mix with coal, and it also has the same sort of density as coal. And those are two key qualities that make it very attractive for the coal-fired power stations to potentially look at as an alternative fuel. The real point is that we try and remove all the soluble minerals through the process, and also we're trying to ensure that we're creating a cleaner fuel, a sulfur-free fuel. Now, as you'll notice on this slide, and it's important to realize, existing white pellet is not as efficient as a fuel, and it has a less heat value, which means, therefore, that for your average customer, they're not going to get as much payment for their dollar. And that is very important to us. If we're able to match coal, we're very attractive to future customers. The base at Lumberton has been the heartland of the company for the last 2 years. A little map there on the left shows you exactly where we are. We're close to the major export ports of Wilmington and Newport and Leicester down in Savannah in Georgia. We've obviously part of the heartland, which currently makes white pellet in the same area, and major competitors do operate in the local vicinity. But we've chosen that facility for an exact reason. It's in the center of biomass production. The wood supplies are well established. The infrastructure to supply wood is easy to attain. And equally, from a transportation standpoint, there are regular supply routes across to Europe and even across to Asia. And we chose that for those very good reasons. Communications is good, and that's how the plant can develop. On page 8, I'm showing you quickly what the plant actually looks like. So on your left-hand side, you can see an aerial view of the plant itself. It's a 151-acre site with a 400,000 square foot facility. And we're building the first stage reactor just to the left-hand side of the plant there and developing it from there. As we expand the plant, I expect to be building bigger plants on the other site, but in different locations. But we are using that site as the core base. And it's fully permitted in order to get the plant up and running. And then we'll be able to expand with additional permits as we go forward. As I mentioned, we're in the heart of the lumber area of Northeast America, and therefore we obviously have established supply chain partners with us who can work to establish and give us feedstock and supply as required. It's sourced very locally. We don't like to drive too far away, within about 90 minutes from the site. And obviously we get a ready access to feedstock resources and waste resources at that. It's only about 70 miles to Wilmington Port, so it can be shipped down to port very quickly and very easily. On the right-hand side, you see a first engineering model of the plant as it looked like when we did the designs late in the year. This is obviously for a basic 3-ton-an-hour facility that can be expanded to a 5-ton-an-hour facility. All the equipment is now basically on site, and we have the option here to increase the production capacity of the plant going forward. As I said, the engineering and the planning is already well underway, and the focus for the last few months has been around getting this plant up and running, as we've disclosed earlier in the year. And these are some very simple photos of some of the work that's been hit underway. On your left-hand side is obviously the large-scale dryer that's been imported. You can see in the middle the kit that's been coming in situ, and you can see on the right-hand side how the plant is coming together in actual sheet steel form. That development is well underway. These photos are probably a couple of weeks old, and every week there is another stage of progress here. As you'll see from our regular Twitter page, if you actually access into it, you can see the progress that we've been making. The future of the business, obviously, as I said, is around expanding the revenue silos from that business. And we're looking at that in a number of ways. The United States and North America is going to be our immediate heartland and focus. And I've given on here a photograph of where the first delivery of fuel to PacifCorp will occur. It's the middle of Utah. It's a coal-fired power station. It's supplying electricity onto the Midwest. And it's a key potential first client for us. But in addition to which, there are coal-fired power stations scattered everywhere in the United States, and we're looking at all of those market opportunities as well. Secondly, we've also had a number of international inquiries for the fuel over the last couple of years, but more interestingly, over the last 4 or 5 months, a number of international inquiries have come to the fore. For example, in the Far East, we've got regular dialogue with partners who are looking at potentially solving issues around empty fruit bunch and palm oil residue and waste, and equally from South America, from other waste residues that have come out of there. They're all opportunities to look at. They're all focused on ensuring that we can actually get the first fuel in production, and we can give people a proper design and a run through of that. I think when we get those moments done, it's a major landmark for us. In terms of the board itself, we've been rebuilding the team over the last 2 years. I'm CEO based in London, and Andrew is also based in London. The core directors are obviously based in London, but Jason Zimmerman is based out in Vancouver, and he's proving instrumental in helping introductions to us to the lumber industry in Canada and also in North America. We now have an active team operating in Lumberton itself. That is including a site manager and a number of employees, and we're expanding that team as fast as we can now. That team will expand to ensure that we can operate at a minimum on a 2-shift process in the not too distant future for the Coalswitch operations, and it'll complement any other activities we're doing on site for lumber or otherwise. In terms of where we are and in terms of the immediate goals, I think clearly our target has been to get the plant up and running and get the 3 ton per hour reference plant in operation. That will give us a chance to accumulate a mass of data and to show potential customers, both licensees and joint venture partners, how the plant can really operate. We really are very keen to show that we're using existing waste materials as one of the hearts and the core of the fuel itself. We've appointed obviously a great engineering partner in the form of Player Design, who have significant experience of building pellet plants around the world. And they've been instrumental in helping us over the last recent months, and are obviously looking and working with us as we expand the opportunity at Lumberton itself. But clearly the idea and the focus is on next generation renewable biomass fuels. And we believe that North America is where those first opportunities are going to arise. Let me pass over to Andrew to tell us some of our recent news and how it's developed.
Thank you, Michael. So the first quarter since I started at Active Energy has been a busy one. In February, we announced that we were doing a balance sheet restructuring, whereby we got our convertible loan note holders £18.8 million worth to agree to either convert, which was £16.6 million worth, and the balance were then redeemed or eliminated. So we've managed to eliminate the entire balance for the CLN debt that we had on the balance sheet. At the same time, we were able to then remove the security that underpinned those notes, which again just frees up the company and its balance sheet then as to looking towards the future. At the same time, we went to the equity markets and we were able to do a fundraise of £7 million, whereby some of our existing shareholders contributed to the company, and we also had a couple of new shareholders coming into the company. In terms of how we intend to use those funds, obviously the majority of those funds is going to be spent on the completion of the plant, which Michael mentioned, the Coalswitch plant, which is under development in Lumberton at the moment. In addition to that, there's some facility upgrades that we need to do at the site itself. And lastly, we wanted to kickstart the engineering to be able to scale up the business once we are in production and we start to see the demand coming through for the product. So we wanted to be in place to do that and have done so. Thanks, Michael. So I just wanted to give a picture of what does our shareholder composition look like post the transaction. So our existing shareholders before the transaction happened now own 39% of the company. The convertible loan note holders who elected to convert into equity hold 43% of the company. I think it's worth mentioning that a number of those note holders were also existing shareholders, so there's a lot of crossover there. And the new shareholders that came into the equity raise, the £7 million equity raise, now own 18% of the company. So in total, 3.9 billion shares in issue. But I think important to note, the balance sheet of the company has now been completely deleveraged with the removal of the convertible loan notes, and the security that underpinned those loan notes has now been removed. So certainly the company in a much better position as we come into this really exciting point where we start to get into production of Coalswitch. Thanks, Michael. And so what we have on this slide is just a view of the share price. Obviously, a lot of excitement when we made the announcement about deleveraging the company and the balance sheet restructuring in January. And then on the right-hand side, I just wanted to give a picture of our shareholder composition at the moment with our top 10 shareholders. You'll note that of those shareholders, the 10 make up roughly 70% of the total shareholding of the company. So a good balance between institutional and retail holders. And you'll note that there's one or two new names in our shareholders which haven't been there before, which is exciting, but also good to see that our existing shareholders have remained loyal with us, which is obviously pleasing. Thank you, Michael. Back to you.
Yeah. So in summary, I think AAG has reached itself a position for scale up. And I think that's the key message that you have to appreciate. There has a lot of background work being done over the last 2 to 3 years, and it's taken a lot of foundations to get the company in the current shape it is. We acquired Lumberton in 2019. It was a critical acquisition to make sure that we had a base in the right part of the United States. We've worked hard in terms of trying to get the permit award and getting the plant up and running. And clearly, we've now got to that point where the plant is just about to start production. It's going to be a very exciting moment for the company. We've got the first order, and I think with the plant up and running and producing fuel in the non-too-distant future, we're going to be in a position of quite exciting times for the company. There is no doubt that obviously the political change in the United States has helped us, and it has helped us in a way that I didn't expect, and it's very encouraging. And I would say right now that we're having a very exciting audience that is very interested to see how the company will develop. I think the goals are going to be very clear for us: to build on the technology, to show how you can use the waste fuels and make it a biomass fuel of choice. And I can see also more time spent scaling up production to be able to deliver to potential clients. So now can I open it up to questions? I think we're done at 18 minutes, Donald.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What an interesting company you have there, Michael.
Thank you, Donald.
Okay. Now it's entirely up to you. Should we start with this morning's announcement, or do you want to? Shall we go down the route of the reference plant? And
why don't I can start with this morning's announcement. As you may have seen this morning, we made a decision to go to NASDAQ OTC, which is the listing exercise we want to do to complement our activities. We've done that for two primary reasons, because as Andrew just highlighted a minute or two ago, we have a number of US holders on the register. They are desperately keen to support us in ways that will help diversify the register for us, and they were obviously keen for us to do that. But also, more importantly, as we've been talking to potential clients in the US, I think having a NASDAQ listing for us will seriously raise our commercial profile over there. So that's why we've been very keen to do it, Donald. It's a very exciting time.
Fantastic. Now, Gary May is interested in your reference plant. He wants to know, you keep telling us it's almost done. Is it the sort of, is building a plant like that not the sort of thing that you can say definitively from one day to the next that it's actually finished? Is that the issue? Will there forever be testing and pilots and so on going on?
No, I mean, I think very clearly, look, we're in the final throes of construction right now, which I'm expecting to be finished towards the end of this month. And we're on track to deliver the fuels to PacifCorp in Q2, as we've always said.
Q2 is a very broad
well, it's only the beginning
target, though.
We've always said to people it was going to be Q2, and it's on track to be in Q2, Donald.
So people are telling me that it's June. Would you agree with that? Have you said publicly June? We
haven't said publicly June, but we have obviously said Q2, and it's on track for that.
So you're still directing to Q2, and
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the intention is to get the fuel up and running, and then clearly that first plant is a watershed for us. It will give us a chance to demonstrate the fuels. I would expect then for us to be able, given the conversations we're currently having, to see an expansion of the commercial opportunities on the back of that, Donald. Clearly, the idea is to start supplying the fuels, not merely just to keep doing reference plants.
So PacifCorp are in there as your first potential client. Have you been having discussions currently with other potential clients?
Yes, we have been having conversations with other potential clients, particularly since we completed the fundraising in January, and people have become very aware of the construction activities we're doing in Lumberton.
Okay, here we go. Here's a brand new question, hot off the blocks for you, from a gentleman called Ben Sugarman. It's a tough question, but it's a fair one, I think. So let me pop this to you. What are the main questions or hurdles potential customers are raising with you about the Coalswitch product? So I'm sure that's one you must have heard before, but nonetheless, it is a real question.
No, it is a real question. At the end of the day, this is why it's so important to get the reference plant up and running. People want to take samples of the fuel and arguably test it for themselves so they can verify from their own analysis the actual potential content and the effects that actually has. The idea of that is so critical, and that's why we need to produce actual industrial sized concepts of the fuel as quickly as possible. That tends to be the biggest question we've had so far. And I think once they've tested it themselves, I think we're seeing an audience that's prepared then to put it into their own commercial activities. And I think that's the encouraging thing for us, Donald.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, in the previous interview you did with me, I spent some time going back over it before today.
Mm-hmm.
And you made the very interesting point that it's not just a 3 to 5 ton plant, which is where Lumberton is today, but you have plans for a 50 ton version, which is presumably a full commercial version. How much more can you tell us about that?
Well, I think right now what we've seen is the clear plan is that we would like to build a larger facility at Lumberton, and that will be our goal, clearly, as the first site. But we're also seeing, I think, since we even did that interview with you, a lot of interest from other potential partners who would also like to have bigger size scalable plants in operation and in production. So the answer is actually that we're very keen to move as quickly as we can from that first plant and to create a more scalable set of volumes for the fuel generally.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. People are talking, people are wanting more detail in terms of tests and so on. Have you really told us everything you possibly can in terms of times and deadlines and breakdowns and so on? Because it really is a focus for lots and lots of attention.
Andrew, why don't you answer that?
You've said it as many times as you can.
I've said it, but I'm
not sure there's too much to add, Michael. I think we've told what we've shared with you what we've shared with the market right now, and as soon as we have more information, of course we'll share it.
Okay.
Testing and building up the data is going to be key, Donald, to the equation, and that's what we're very excited about. Now we've got a machine that can produce the fuel in scale. We're going to be in a position where that is going to create new commercial opportunities.
Okay. Where do you see additional licensing opportunities emerging?
I see licensing opportunities will come both from within the US and generally beyond the US, internationally, as we said in our presentation. We have had regular dialogue with people in the last recent weeks in other countries and other territories, and I see the fact that a lot of them are going to want to move very quickly once the fuel is in production.
Okay. You mentioned that the Biden presidency turns out to be rather more favorable for your business than you expected. What did you mean by that? And give me an example or two.
Well, I think obviously the Biden presidency has changed the whole tenor of the way the US wants to approach renewable fuels and renewable technology. There's now going to be a much greater awareness of that, of what they need to do and how they develop going forward. The fact that we appear as a homegrown tech in the United States is very useful. And the fact we're developing it in the United States is also a tremendous opportunity. So that really is why I think there's been a change of tenor of where we are. We believe that biomass will be part of that equation going forward. And actually the really exciting bit is that because the US doesn't have too much of an established white pellet industry, there is actually opportunity for a new generation fuel like ours in the black pellet to be able to create a new bridgehead into the marketplace. And that's why I was saying we're getting a lot more interest from people who are genuinely engaged, who would like to see what this fuel could represent.
What do you think the scale of the opportunity is in America in itself? So perhaps we should ask you for the scale of opportunity in America and then broaden it out to the world.
Well, 30% of all US electricity right now is burnt in the United States from burning coal. So if nothing else, there's an opportunity there if we could just produce a small fraction of that market. There is still over 2,000 coal-fired power stations around the world. Forget the UK has sort of moved on a bit, but certainly around the rest of the world and rest of Europe, we see a huge opportunity there. Equally, in Europe itself, you've got an existing white pellet industry, which is also coming under more pressure to get a better set of fuels anyway. So we believe there's also a subset of the market that could be coming from that as well. So the idea is that there is a huge opportunity there for using it as a complement and ultimately an alternate to coal.
Okay. Mohammed Ishmael, he asks a very broad brush question, and he says, how are you adapting to green energy? So I don't know quite where he's coming from. I would have thought you were a form of green energy.
Look, biomass is part of the equation for green energy. If you look at the British government stats that came out when they did their paper in December, they clearly said that biomass still had to be part of the UK agenda. So I think in sense of how we're addressing green energy, we want to be part of the future equation of that. In terms of from our own consumption side, as I've mentioned earlier on, we're very keen on using waste resources and wherever possible, recycling that into fuels and creating the pellets from that. We've got a very large facility. There's a lot of things that we can do at the site in very simple terms, whether it's solar power to assist actually energy demand in the process and for the fuels itself, or just planting more trees on the facility to help increase log burns, or looking at new energy crops. There's a lot of things that we're going to be looking at going forward, but I would say that the whole environmental agenda is part of the equation and part of the solution for AEG.
Okay,
maybe I can just add in there quickly. So the demand side for the product is obviously under pressure in terms of the renewable space. But we also see, and we've had a number of calls in the last couple of weeks and months from guys on the supply side, the feedstock side, who are also coming under pressure in terms of how they treat their residuals and their waste products. And so we're seeing inquiries from guys who prepare to help us with feedstock suppliers, because they're also under pressure and under the same renewables agenda.
How much would you have to pay for those feedstock supplies?
Well, variable, but people are looking for solutions where they can get rid of some of their residuals and wastes, and we would like to be a solution for it.
I think that's the point, Donald. It actually is an opportunity of itself that we didn't quite expect, but the idea of us being presented and working with them finding a solution is something that's very attractive to them.
I think that's the nature of innovative projects, though, isn't it, Michael? You go out there and suddenly the marketplace comes to you.
Yes, and fingers crossed that'll exactly be what will happen.
Okay, Mike Addison-Smith asks, can you advise the overall timing for the intended NASDAQ listing? Which sounds like a very sensible question to me.
It's a very sensible question. I think the timelines from where we are today is that it'll get closed out before the end of May, early June.
He said NASDAQ, he meant OTC, didn't he?
In NASDAQ OTC, correct.
Okay, NASDAQ OTC, fantastic. Okay, Kenneth Kemsley, perhaps our final question of the evening. When production is up and running, what are the likely sales numbers to be achieved? Can you give us it in terms of quarters, he says?
Andrew, what do you?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. So Donald, I think that the thing about the product that we're about to bring to the market is that we're about to find out just how much demand there is for this product. So obviously we have internal modeling, and we've come up with some numbers, and we've shared that with our brokers who've put it out in papers, but we're about to get to that place where we start the production, and we'll really get a good feel of what the demand is once we start doing that, and once the potential customers can come in. Look at the
question I should be asking you, Andrew, what does this business look like in 6 months' time and a year's time?
Yeah, so I think in terms of our modeling, we looked at this as 2021 is a year where we will look to try and break even. That's the objective for us this year. And then going forward, we see ourselves making profit and EBITDA profit going into 2022 and then beyond. And as we scale that up, obviously the profits scale up with that.
Completely brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm sure the audience were very appreciative of that.